And welcome back to the Nutrimedical Report. And we have, of course, hour 3, we have Tim Alexander, and we don't have our nuclear expert here today, but he'll be back next week, Chris Harris. We will touch on some of the issues over Fukushima Daiichi. Of course, starfish are dying, and the salmon
they're now
dying.
Dr. Bill, they're talking about billions of sea animals, sea life creatures dying now, having died, all along the Pacific coast of Canada, the United States, Mexico, and going on down to Chile and so forth.
Well, the local ones here, and I'm actually going to be going out into the months fishing. I've checked, and locally we really don't have much die-off of the local fish. It's the fish that travel long distances like tuna that get into the areas where they can get into food chains that actually will kill them. So it's quite far north. We're talking about the Kuroshio Current hits British Columbia and Washington State. And the effects down as far as northern San Diego haven't gotten here yet. The problem is that this is going to continue to bioaccumulate, and it will get worse and worse.
Yeah, remember the movie, The China Syndrome? I think that was the name of it, wasn't it? Oh, right. My, it was 30 years ago. Hank Fonda's daughter, Jane Fonda, and several people were in it. But anyway, it was about a nuclear reactor that melted, and or almost melted. It was called the China Syndrome. Well, what we have is 3 nuclear reactors that have completed the China Syndrome. The enriched uranium plutonium has gone through the bottom. It's in the waters. It's a nightmare from hell, and it's a giant cancer. And the powers that be in this world, the media is ignoring it. The alternative media, thank goodness, isn't. Certainly your show that I'm lucky enough to be on twice a week, Jeff Rensch and a few others are talking about it and trying to wake people up to it. This is a disaster. This is the world's biggest man-made disaster in human history.
Now, Jim, the reason why they're doing that, and I've talked extensively this morning to Professor McCanny today and yesterday, and I connected by Skype. Literally, we did a show on Tuesday for a full hour with Professor McCanny. And the real reason is this, and I'll do it in a series of questions. The mountains are formed by when the crust of the Earth slides on the mantle, and it happens periodically when deep space objects pass near enough to the Earth that gravity waves actually cause what's called a lithospheric disjunction, where the crust slides on the mantle until it stops. When it crunches together like an accordion, it forms mountains. So the giant forces of gravity waves from passing objects like a dwarf star, and there's one that's actually in the cartouches of ancient Egypt, Sumer, that Moses knew about, and the ancient high priest, called the destroyer Hercules. It's the one they call Planet X, which Tycho Brahe, the Danish astronomer over 120 years ago, looked at the perturbations of the outer planets and discovered that there must be a deep space object with gravitonic effects. Well, I took care of employees working on the SPT South Pole Telescope in Murdo Bay, Antarctica in the mid-90s when I had security clearance. And they had the SPT down there with a Pi Meson deep space telescopes and also what's called scopes were looking at gravity waves from deep space. Now, gravity waves travel faster than the speed of light. People may or may not know this, but they're actually in the process of trying to map out all the wormholes in our galaxy. And you can also see the approach of objects in deep space where you can't even see their light yet because they're too far away for the light to travel here. For example, the Oort cloud is out at 0.73 light years, which really means it takes 3/4 of a year for the light to travel from the outer solar system to us. That's pretty far, isn't it? 9 months. It takes 9 months to travel from the outer Oort cloud into us. That's with light. Now, with gravitonic waves, they're almost instant, basically. And when you have gravity waves from an approaching object, they can actually eventually start to upregulate the nuclear forces inside the planet, like our planet's a nuclear reactor, which is why it has a magnetosphere, and is also creating oil and hydrocarbons. It's actually created because the Earth is actually a nuclear reactor creating these bigger molecules. And what the globalists are doing is they're building underground cities in a big panic, like it says in the Bible in Revelation 6. They'll hide themselves in the deep places in the rocks. They call these places hotels. And their favorite place is these dormant magma domes when the Earth's crust moves and the hot spot's not there, so it doesn't feed it anymore. And they're on average 4 to 12 cubic miles in size, about an hour, mile and a half to 4 miles down. And they build these cities in there, or they'll build a matrix city where they have tunneling machines. I'm not talking about the shuttle type. These are sodium-cooled nuclear reactors that hit the rock face with impact lasers and then blow the debris on the sidewalls to create a zero-debris obsidian core and lay a tri-radiate maglev track and then vacuum out the tunnel and put fiber optic cables in the ceiling. And people say, well, they don't do that. Yes, they can actually tunnel through. Back in the mid-90s, 7 miles per day. Now they're up to 14 miles a day. They can actually cut through rock.
Is that like the U.S. Air Force tunneling machine I've seen a picture of on the net?
No, that's child's play compared to the one. I took care of John Fiala, who was the cohort of Phil Schneider, so I know an awful lot about this stuff and where the tunnels are and what's going on. And as I say, I only released 10% of what I know, because most of the stuff I know, the human race is not ready for it yet. But
okay, now one question I have about this. Okay, this is not my field of expertise. I had 2 semesters of undergraduate astronomy many years ago, so I'm out of my league. But assuming that there is this dwarf star, okay, it comes every 3,600 years. Why do they have to go so far down? Because it didn't kill everybody 3,600 years ago, or another 3,600 years, et cetera, et cetera.
Apparently the third passage, and this is what they've worked out, roughly every third passage, it's much more cataclysmic. And the last big passage was the one that caused the Younger Dryas period, which is the 1,000-year ice age. And of course, preceding that, of course, the powers that be at the time also had a nuclear war. As you interviewed Jonathan Gray, there's pretty good evidence there was a nuclear war around 4,500 years ago and again around 13,000 years ago. So it's not the first time. The fall of the Minoans, and really King Minos was just the last remnants of the Atlanteans. When it talks about in Aristotle's comments and the Greek stories about Atlantis, they're actually referring to the last remnants of Atlantis, which is in the eastern Mediterranean. And when Thera, which is the volcano that exploded and blew up the island of Santorini, created the giant caldera, that actually created the destruction that resulted in all the plagues of Egypt. It was caused by the exact same event, the passage of the dwarf star. Moses knew about this because he's an astronomer and astrologist, which are the same. And he was taught by the high priest. His name Moses means he was actually supposed to be the next pharaoh, not the blood son of the pharaoh, because they were so inbred. Moses was selected as the daughter of the pharaoh's son to become the next pharaoh. His name Moses means, like Tutmosis, he was actually to be the next pharaoh. And it's only when he discovered he was actually Hebrew, and he discovered his actual mother, that he became an outcast after he killed the Egyptian who was torturing his fellow Hebrews working at a work site. So people should know this history, okay? And what's really going on is the globalists are fully aware of this, and they're in a panic, and they want to get a total control system in place. That's why they're not fixing Fukushima. I don't see any engineers. One of the comments that I've made repeatedly is, where is my disrespect? I'm looking for disrespect here. I don't get disrespect from scientists calling and saying, Deagle, you're nuts. You don't have technical answers for Fukushima.
Well, it's not on the radar screen of mainstream media, and it evidently people in the business are told to shut up, right?
Well, it's not just told to shut up. They're actually told if you open up your mouth, we'll kill you. The fact is
that's a pretty good way to tell you to shut up.
Right, and the real issue is they want Fukushima to sterilize the population after it makes them deathly ill. They wanted to cause a devastation in the world food supply, and as Fukushima weakens the population and also thins the ozone layer, it drives up ground level radiation, which is speeding up the evolution of viruses. So the H5N1 now has killed in the last month 20 million turkeys, and approaching that number of hen-laying chickens in the United States alone.
Yep.
Tim, last night I watched the 60-minute special on the weekend about the war last summer, and I think there were initially 3 Israeli boys that were kidnapped and killed by Hamas. By the way, Hamas was trained by Shin Bet and by the Israelis in the first place, so it's literally an offshoot trained by Israel, and I call the state of Israel, it's a real hell. And I can say that. People say, well, how can you say that? It's almost like, you can't make black jokes unless you're black. Well, guess what? I'm descended from Jews and from Cohens, okay? So I can make that statement in my family work. Maronite Christians on my mother's side from Lebanon that owned land going back 2,800 years ago were taken off to Esfahan, the capital of Media, and I even took on the name of the tribe of the Medes when my ancestor, the lineal descendant of Moses, head of that family, one of the 424 families that's only the blood descendants of Moses, married the daughter of the king of the Medes and took on their name called Nima. And I can tell you right now, what I see going on in Israel is horrendous. 500 and some children died, and they had the psychiatrists that are trying to treat kids by having them draw diagrams to get over their horror of what's happened. But these children can't go to sleep at night. And now you get all this human suffering, and you have Obama determined to split the land and to, quote, make a peace treaty. The problem is that if you have a group of people at each other's necks, it's not going to be a peace treaty unless you want to spell it P-I-E-C-E. Pieces of nations, pieces of people. It's going to be a trigger for a great big war. It won't just be a local war in the Middle East. It'll be a thermonuclear war that will destroy most of humanity.
The general Middle Eastern war that Netanyahu and his the Kid Party has been pushing for some time is really the trigger for the Third World War. And I believe that's in the Bible, basically, because that's where the war starts. And if you look at the numbers of soldiers, 100 million coming from the east, it can only be Russia and China,
Right. In fact, Mao Zedong actually quotes in his red book that the 200 million in Revelation 9 are his people in his army. He actually says that.
I somewhere, I think I still have a copy of that book. I was a political science major and studied Mandarin Chinese and a lot of Asian studies, and I used to have that little red book. I don't know where I have it. It's probably worth money, now.
Yeah, here's this atheist actually quoting Revelation 9. Now, is that bizarre or what?
Yeah. Can we talk about the British election before
let's get into that, because
the
British election's a big deal, because what you said before the show is that this election could mean a very rocky future for the British Isles and for.
Well, let me give you a quick thumbnail sketch here. You have three major political parties: the conservatives, which are also called Tories, the Labour, and then you have the Lib Dems. The Lib Dems are the old Liberal Party, and they went through a couple different manifestations, and they're hangers on, and they were bigger than a minor party, but they hadn't formed a government since very early in the 20th century. Well, about 5 years ago, we had an election in the UK. It was a hung parliament. That means no party got a clear majority. And the number 3 party was the Lib Dems. And both parties, both the Tories and the Labour, tried to get them to go along with them. They went with the conservative Tories. Now, the Lib Dems, many people voted for them the last time around. That's why they had so many MPs. It was kind of a very unusual situation because people are sick to death of the two main parties. It's very much like liberal and Democrats and Republicans in America. Flip side of the same coin. They both serve the interests of the global banking cartel and the Zionist big government, big business, and they could care less about the average person. Well, the Lib Dems basically sacrificed their credibility by supporting everything the Tories were doing, so the Lib Dems are going back to being a minor third party, but in reality, they're not even going to be that. There's heavy turnout. The election polls closed not quite a half hour ago. There's been heavy turnout across the UK. Very good weather, only some showers in a few areas in northern England. So very good weather. Based on the studies shown before the election, in Scotland, it looks like the Scottish National Party will gain all 59 MP seats, Member of Parliament seats in Scotland. Now, the Conservatives only had one. They'll lose that. The Labour had quite a number. They'll probably lose every one. And then, of course, the Lib Dems will be going down to defeat in Scotland as well. So whether it's 57, 58, or 59, that's an enormous block of MPs, and they will be the third biggest party in the new parliament. Now, the question is who will come in first, either the Conservative Party or Labour. That's a good question. It takes, 326 people to have a majority in Parliament. There's 650 members of Parliament in the House of Commons. The House of Lords are for life. Okay, now, since no party will have a majority, and there probably aren't enough parties to put together, the minor parties to put together enough people to form a government. Whoever wins, that is the number one position, either Conservatives or Labour, will have to deal with the Scottish National Party, or there'll be a minority government and there'll be early elections. That puts the Scottish National Party in a heck of a position. Abe Lincoln used to tell the story about two guys in a wrestling fighting match in a ring, and they fought each other and wrestled so hard they ended up in each other's clothes. And that's basically what's happening here. The Scots people have not forgotten that some months ago at the Scottish national election vote, the Labour politicians, or the London politicians, Labour, Conservative, Lib Dem, put a knife in their back. They rigged the elections. They stuffed the ballot box, and that's widely perceived in Scotland now. And it's one of the main driving forces why the Scots are saying hell no to all the big parties and voting the Scottish National Party. Now, the Scottish National Party, their goal is to have a free, independent Scotland. And there are several ways they can go about this. They can require, as a condition of signing on to a coalition government or supporting a minority government so it doesn't immediately collapse, a new election in Scotland, one run not by London but by Edinburgh. And if that happens, you can, dollars to donuts, there'll be an independent Scotland within a year or so. Now, there are other more interesting twists to this, and it's going to affect our relationship with the United Kingdom, or what's left of it, with the European Union, all kind of stuff. We'll be back.
Yeah, when we come back, it's important to understand what's going on, because the transatlantic partnership's going on and trying to make government vestigial. And this breakup of Great Britain could be very small.
Mars and many of the world's most...
To the Nutrimedical report, and Tim, let's go through some more of the news items.
Can I finish up on the UK election?
Yes.
Several interesting things can happen. The person that can form a government traditionally is invited by the Queen to go to Buckingham Palace, and he then tells her, I have sufficient votes in the House of Commons to form a government. And, the meeting only lasts a few minutes, and he walks out, and everything is hunky-dory, and he moves in literally that day into number 10 Downing Street if he's not already in there. Now, it can get real dicey if the numbers are fairly close between two main parties, and there may even be an attempt to form some other coalition, and then the Queen has to decide. A number of years ago in Australia, something like that happened, and the Queen decided, and all hell broke loose, and they changed their constitution, in effect, so that would never happen again. The Queen has to be extraordinarily careful about what looks like it will be coming down the pike, because if she makes the wrong step, or any step. She may not, she may have a choice between one or the other, and whichever one she picks, the other side will be very mad, and it can have a profound effect on the British royal family maintaining their hold on the throne and not the place not becoming a republic. That's one problem. Secondly, and also there's this whole bit with the Scottish thing. If she's seen to not to be favoring England as opposed to Scotland, the Scots right now want to keep her as Queen of Scots in an independent Scotland, but that could change. So who knows? But also you've got multiple situations. There could be a coalition formed by the Scottish National Party. If they pull in the Welsh independents, there's several from Northern Ireland, a couple parties that could join them. Maybe the UK Independent Party, certainly the Greens and a few others. And then if they do that, they need maybe 250, maybe less than 200 members to form a government in addition to them. Now, I've known a lot of people in the House of Commons as well as the House of Lords, dealt with them over the years. It's not like the House of the U.S. House of Representatives in the United States. There's 650 MPs in the House of Commons, and from a country quite a bit smaller than the United States. So they're far more kind of down to earth. They don't get paid near as much. Now, if you're a junior minister or, of course, a cabinet minister, then you get a lot of perks. You get a lot more money. You get a staff. You get a government car and a driver, et cetera, et cetera.
So what's the bottom line, Tim? Because
Bottom line, you could. There is a scenario where the Scottish National Party ends up running the government with the help of a lot of others.
Yeah, I think that's very probable.
In any case, it's going to be probably, it could be weeks before they have a government in place. And this could be one of the factors in the chaos that's coming down the road and is growing. And it's very difficult to say exactly what's going to happen, but it could be a real mess.
Let me summarize some of the things that we've kind of, the broad brush of what's happening the last few weeks that are reporting. We see the coming of the end of a Shemitah cycle of 7 years. This coming fall, the Shemitah cycle will end twice, exactly 2 7-year periods after 9/11 to the day. We also have the economy tanking. It's 50 years plus of the lowest Baltic Dry Index in history in the last 50 years. We have commercial closure of Walmarts across the country and across Canada, which aren't just closing because they're trying to convert them to civil detention interrogation camps, which, people have conspiracy theories about that. I actually got U.S. Postal Office diagrams of actually interrogation rooms that are being built into major postal routing stations.
There's a problem with that, though. The problem is we have guns.
Right. The problem is, they're trying everything. They had this Sandy Hook situation up there where they had false flag, slaughtering children. It goes all the way from Ruby Ridge trying to get patriots to now Jade Helm, which is basically, I call it terrorism pornography by the government to try to pornographically terrorize people into saying, I better not be on the list because they'll kill me and my family. And all it does is make us madder.
I think it's a lot of hype, but go ahead. I'm sorry.
Well, it's making us madder. And so what I see is I see economic downturn becoming painful this fall, but it's all by design because, remember, they control all the levers. What they want to do is they want to enter us into the matrix because ultimately they want to get rid of cash. They've already talked about it. Now they have this thing called bailing in policy, which they put in the Canadian government, the British banks, and the American Congress has already, and the government's actually put this policy in place so they can literally take your bank deposits, now with all the derivatives and the pension funds and everything, and they can literally seize all of your money. And people don't realize that this is the situation right now. There's a downturn in the economy because they closed, let's say, the Strait of Hormuz. They can seize everything. Now, it's all by design.
Again, we have guns, and that there may be some...
here's what's
problems with their
happen.
scenarios.
If they try to pull off a martial law scenario, we'll march in every capital of every state and we'll take over the federal government within a matter of days. And all the armies in America and all the special forces won't get in our way because we'll slaughter them as we go.
Well, they're Americans,
and there's 23 exactly. There's 23 million.
And if they bring in foreign troops, then that's
veterans,
an invasion, and there'll be an American behind every tree with a rifle or a shotgun killing them.
Just like the emperor in the Second World War said that there'll be an American behind every blade of grass, not just every tree.
Yeah.
What I think people should understand here, and this is something for you out there in the government that are listening to every phone conversation, take notice of this. We're mad as hell, and we're not going to take it anymore. We're intelligent people, and we're not wimps. We're not afraid to die, and we're not afraid to kill. And we are godly Joshua Christians that have our sword drawn and we have our prayer shawl on at the same time praying for peace. But if we don't get peace, P-E-A-C-E, we will get pieces, P-I-E-C-E. We're not going to take it anymore. And what's going on right now, and people should understand this with Jade Helm, this should not be going on. This is a simulation of actually grabbing patriots and either executing them on the spot or pulling them away to civil detention camps. Why are we tolerating this? I have no idea. The people in Colorado shut it down. Most of Texas shut it down. There's a few little simple places where they still want to have this little war game because they want to put it in the news. And the news means you be afraid, be really afraid. No, you out there, you special op forces, you Delta forces, you know that you won't even try to do this. And 3 years ago in the state of Washington, in New York State, they actually had the SWAT teams actually begged the governor of the state of New York that they passed these laws. They were going to actually start seizing guns of veterans in their homes at 3 a.m.
Yeah, a friend of mine knows some deputies and the former sheriff.
And they told the government
he was very pro gun control, and one of them told him, he said, "Fine, you want us to go in and collect guns? You go in first."
Right, exactly. So in other words, it put a stop to the governor and the laws that they passed. And you need to understand this. And you understand this, Mr. Obama and Mr. Governors or anybody else who thinks that you're going to disarm Americans. Forget it. We don't care if there's a dwarf star coming. We don't care if you hide in your underground lairs. We don't care what. Our God will protect us and tell us what to do.
Well, and remember, it's one thing to tell Americans to go to Afghanistan and shoot some of these yahoos, ragheads.
Right.
It's another thing to tell them, well, why don't you go to Detroit or Boise, Idaho, or Evansville, Indiana, or wherever, Austin, Texas, wherever, and take over and start shooting Americans? Huh?
Yeah,
that ain't gonna fly.
Yeah, not many of them will do that.
Taking supplements? Are you searching for a
Tim, there's a lot of things going on with their infrastructure. You have here about the Watts Bar nuclear plant, and we call it the Sequoia nuclear plant. We have what we call post-geriatric nuclear plants, many of them sitting on fault lines, subsidence zones, below the high water mark where the backup diesel generators
Well, the whole concept, Dr. Bill, of using enriched uranium, plutonium, to boil water to not make tea, but to drive a steam turbine, is nuts. And plutonium and enriched uranium are the two most dangerous substances known to mankind. And almost all nuclear power plants, they have these spent fuel rods still at the site because they're too dangerous to move. They don't know what to do with them. So, it's just a nightmare. And supposedly, decades ago, we'll figure out a solution. Well, we haven't figured out a solution.
Yeah. The most important things I tell people to do now is start taking nutraceuticals to protect yourself from Fukushima. Start getting on nutraceuticals and away from drugs and away from the toxic medical system. If you need drugs, take the minimum, as I say, 20% of drugs are appropriate, 20%.
And don't eat anything with corn or Roundup in it. That includes wheat products because they spray wheat at the end so they can harvest it. All corn, just about all corn, unless it's organic, is Roundup ready. Roundup is banned in a big part of the world. It is one of the most dangerous substances in any food chain anywhere on Earth, and it's absolutely outrageous that the people making it, Monsanto, that they're not in prison for life.
Well, no, I don't think the prison for life would be good. I think they need to be executed.
Yeah. Well, that's actually what I think, too, but I was trying to be nice. By the way, Dr. Bill, before we run out of time, I got some breaking news here.
Yeah.
The vice chairman, or deputy chairman as they call him, of the main opposition party in Turkey has told the media that, and now this is not just a member of the parliament. This is number 2 guy, the main opposition. It's called the Republicans People Party. That the Turkish government is planning to send ground forces into Syria within 2 days. And he's saying the government's reckless policies will drag Turkey into an unbelievable nightmare. Now, if that is true, and I hope it's not true, and I would think one of the purposes of spilling the beans is to prevent it from happening. But if that's true and it goes through, then I think we are looking at, before we even get out of May, an absolute nightmare in the Middle East.
Well, 2.5 years ago, the Turks signed a deal with Iran to supply oil and gas to them. They basically get no oil and gas except from this pipeline from Iran. The Iranians are going to cut it off immediately. Number 2, what's going to happen is the Strait of Hormuz will close, so the oil coming out of the Persian Gulf is going to stop. 1/3 of the oil on the planet comes through there. The world economy is leveraged on the petrodollar. It's going to die. Countries like Saudi Arabia, they're already teetering on economic collapse. They're going to collapse completely. Now, these countries, you think have a lot of money.
The Syrians will cut loose with their heavy stuff.
Right, and they'll cut loose with your concept personic cruise missiles, Hoot supercavitation torpedoes, the S-400 anti-aircraft system, and they'll have the Russian radar jamming system, so that when these large F-14 force that comes in from
F-16s,
Turkey,
yeah.
F-16s, what'll happen is the Syrians will jam them. You're going to start seeing a carrier group come down from Russia and China to the Gulf of Aden, and you're going to start seeing when it comes some serious Gulf of Tonkin type events, which means we're basically teetering.
I hope that's not going to happen, but that is a scenario that is.
I'd say there's an 80% chance
of quite possible or quite reasonable.
Okay, one or another variation on that is virtually, I'd say, an 80% chance of happening between now and September. 80%, not a 20% chance or 10%. Now, what will come out of that, because they want this disaster, is they want enough disaster to have a peace treaty in the Middle East, which Obama wants to get crowned as this world savior that he's going to develop. Yeah, right. And then secondly, they want to have enough crash in the world economy, because then they want to move to a cashless system, because the real plan, believe it or not, the real plan to save the cost of actually printing and doing money is to get rid of money. So the next plan is to say, the only way we can keep the interest rate so low is if we get rid of money. So everything goes biometric.
So if they hit a button, say maybe you're a Republican and they don't like you, or you're a Democrat and they don't like you, or maybe you actually had the audacity to say that most of our people in Congress are crooks or something like that. You may go to get your money out, and you may go to a store to buy food, and you're there with your RFID chip in your hand or your credit card. Well, sorry, Mr. Jones, but there's no money in your account. He says, "What do you mean? I've got $50,000. That's all everything I own is in my." No, Mr. Jones, it's gone. I'm sorry, but the police are here to pick you up. Too bad. And I mean, see, that's tyranny, and that's what they want. A one world government, a one world currency, absolute total control. And if we let it happen, believe me, this is the same bunch of people that invented the gulags in Russia and killed 100 million people, and the former Russian Empire that invented the Nazis and the concentration camps and killed so many people and imprisoned so many, and the slave labor camps. They'll do it to us. If we
I think that it's a very grave possibility that the peace treaty will be signed very soon. I can't give a date, but according to the cycles called the Shemitah cycles, the optimal period, I'm not saying the absolute dates, is this fall or 2022.
Well, I don't think we're going to make it to 2022. I could be wrong.
Right.
But
that's on the Shemitah cycle. It's my guess is that what's going to happen is we're going to have enough of a disaster that we're going to see the partitioning of the state of Israel. Because when you see the amount of destruction I saw in this 60-minute special on the weekend that I saw last night, neither the Palestinians nor the Israelis can withstand any more of this dialogue of death. And, you know, the people, the young people basically are either choosing to want to die for the cause. The place is getting more radicalized than ever because of the war that happened last summer in Gaza. And I think that Obama wants to waltz in, and the globalists want him to be the kind of their proxy savior.
Well, you know, I linked a couple stories. I just did a very short update on my news blog Europe, and one of the stories, Saudi Arabia, everybody's talking about them getting nuclear weapons, which, by the way, I think Saudi Arabia has had nukes for quite a number of years. They helped finance the PAC program. The Pakistani nuclear weapons program.
Exactly.
And they bought from China quite a number of years ago a significant number of intermediate-range ballistic missiles that were liquid fueled, and they've converted them to solid fuel. And they're really designed only for nuclear weapons.
How long do you think they've had them there? And I actually got contacts inside the Israeli intelligence, and even sent me satellite photos.
Oh, yeah.
They've had them. The Chinese gave them to them over 30 years ago.
Yeah, exactly.
And they upgraded them so that by 2003, that's like 12 years ago, they had a strike distance of 3,000 miles.
Well, and when you change from liquid to solid, there's no signature that you're refueling, which is a big red flag. Oops, they're refueling. You know, they're fueling their missiles. They're going to fire them within a half hour because it takes a while to fuel them. If they're solid, all they have to do is erect them, and boom, and that takes 5 minutes or less. By the way, a senior retired Russian general who's well plugged in still today says Russia will defend eastern Ukraine even if it means invading Kyiv, which is, of course, what I follow.
One of the most important things to do is to get your Nutrimeds to take care of your health. I tell people what you invest in.
Absolutely.
Number one, Nutrimeds to take care of your health, storage food and greenhouse, self-protection, bottled water, and literally seriously think, as we have our realtor expert,
Nutridyne,
get yourself ready.
Your stuff is really good.
Yeah, and get ready for the fact
that number one.
Well, that's number one, because if you aren't with like-minded people, if you do get into a Armageddon-style village, which could happen if things really collapse, it's not going to happen now, but it's coming. What I suspect next is we're going to have enough destruction. They're going to try to get rid of cash next after a period of war. They're going to partition the Middle East. In a sense, they're going to set up a caliphate, because the globalists want a Muslim caliphate to control the Islamic nations. And they're going to, if you want to call it, bring more and more Muslims to America and to Europe to completely scramble our social system.